On the 26th of January 2024, a statue of Captain Cook in Melbourne was toppled. It was severed at the ankles with an angle grinder. Since that night, the plinth that it stood on has remained empty. A few months later, 2 people were arrested trying to do something similar in Sydney's Hyde Park. They were unsuccessful, and this statue of Captain Cook still stands. For now. But it's only a matter of time before this statue also falls. It will either be removed by the local council or toppled by activists. Either way, you will not be able to view this statue in 10 years' time. Unless, of course, the political will to preserve it prevails. In this video, I will share the story of this statue. I will talk about the artist who sculpted it and delve into its symbolic significance. I hope to convince you that it embodies the spirit of our civilization, the Faustian spirit, that spurred European man to explore every corner and quarter of the globe. I hope to convince you that by defending this statue, we defend more than just a work of art. We defend the soul of our civilization. This statue of Captain Cook is made of bronze and is nearly 4 meters tall. It stands on a pedestal that is about 7 meters high. This makes it one of the tallest statues in Sydney. It was created in 1878 by the British sculptor Thomas Woolner. Woolner was a founding member of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, an artistic movement that sought to return to the artistic traditions that existed before Raphael. Hence the name Pre-Raphaelite. The Pre-Raphaelites painted in bright, clear colours with great attention to detail, and frequently chose biblical and mythological subjects. The Brotherhood produced works such as The Lady of Shalott, Ophelia, and The Death of King Arthur. Woolner was one of the 7 original members of the Brotherhood, and the only sculptor among them. Woolner's ambition was to create monumental statues that aligned with the aesthetic aims of the Pre-Raphaelites. He wanted to replicate, in sculptural form, the same attention to detail that the Pre-Raphaelites had achieved in painting. He wanted to create monumental statues that depicted episodes from history, literature, poetry, mythology, and the Bible. But he was unable to do this because of the economic conditions of the 19th century. In the first half of the 19th century, it was extremely difficult for British sculptors to get public commissions or private patronage for their work. As a result, Woolner lived in poverty for over a decade. He scraped together a living by creating small portrait profiles of people. In 1851, he created a portrait profile of the Scottish historian and philosopher, Thomas Carlyle. In his book on heroes and hero worship, Carlyle argues that all society is founded on hero worship, which he defines as the reverence and obedience done to men, really great and wise. In other words, a culture is defined by the heroes that it worships. The founding fathers defined what it meant to be an American in the same way that Moses defined what it meant to be Jewish. What we revere and who we revere determines who we are. These ideas resonated with Woolner and shaped his understanding of the sculptor's role in society. The sculptor didn't just create beautiful monuments, he helped define the ideals of his culture by immortalizing its heroes in stone. In addition to creating a portrait profile of Carlyle, Woolner also produced images of other British heroes. None of these works sold, and Woolner's financial situation became dire. In 1852, Woolner left London and sailed towards Australia in the hope of making his fortune on the Victorian goldfields. The moment of his departure was captured by the Pre-Raphaelite painter, Forward Madox Brown. This painting was called The Last of England, and it depicts Woolner standing on a boat as he sails away from London. Woolner arrived in Melbourne on the 25th of October, 1852. He received an unexpectedly warm reception in this distant colony on the outer edge of the British Empire. The colony superintendent, Latrobe, met with him personally only 3 days after his arrival. At this point in time, artists were a rarity in Melbourne. As the superintendent of Victoria, Latrobe was determined to change this. He wanted to nurture an artistic community in this distant colony, and therefore took a keen interest in Woolner. He told Woolner that he must not leave the colony without doing something in the fine arts first. But the most pressing task for Woolner was the fortune awaiting him on the goldfields. He left Melbourne and went to Ballarat, where he began prospecting for gold. For 1 month, he endured hard labour in primitive conditions for little to no reward. After a month, he realised that he was not cut out for this sort of life. To quote a letter he wrote to his father, "My anticipations are considerably moderated since I began digging. Now I see no very sparkling fortune in the future." He made his way back to Melbourne and wrote to his father once more, saying, "I have come to Melbourne to work at my art. There is every prospect of my doing well, as I have powerful friends who are anxious to aid me in every way. Woolner began producing portrait medallions of important Victorian settlers, such as Latrobe. Portrait medallions are small, portable works of art that typically feature a detailed side profile of an individual. This art form originated in classical antiquity with coins that depicted Roman emperors. Adhering to pre-Raphaelite principles, Woolner sought to replicate nature with meticulous precision. His portrait medallions of notable Australians not only portrayed a striking physical resemblance, but also conveyed a sense of their inner character. Because Woolner had no contemporary artistic rivals in Australia, his portrait medallions were highly sought after. Australia gave him a unique window of opportunity to practice and develop his skills as a sculptor, and he was extremely prolific in the year of 1854. But after a year in this faraway colony, he decided to return to England. As he left Australia, he wrote, "When I first saw Australia, its hills were soaked in romantic richness, and a halo of promise crowned it with glory. Although I was unsuccessful on the goldfields, I do not regret going. It has made me strong and more vigorous than I ever felt before." After returning to London, his career began to flourish. He was commissioned to create statues of a number of British imperial heroes, such as John Robert Godley, Lord Palmerston, Thomas Babington, Macaulay, and Stamford Raffles. In 1874, he was contacted by the government of New South Wales. They asked him to create a gigantic, freestanding monument of Captain Cook. He accepted and began working on the statue. In his diary, he wrote, "My idea is to make an animated figure filled with wonder and delight in the moment of discovering a new country. Smitten by the sun, he would always stand a shining welcome to all comers to the fair Australian land." In 1878, this monument was unveiled to the Australian public. It was placed near Woolloomooloo Bay so that Cook could watch all the vessels coming and going. Cook's face shows seriousness and resolution. In his left hand, he holds a telescope, a reminder of his skill as a navigator and symbol of extended vision, far beyond the capacity of the unaided human eye. His right arm is stretched out above his head, the palm facing up to the sky. While speaking about this statue, the art critic Caroline Clement observed, "This monumental figure does in fact splendidly embody those principles first defined by Woolner and the pre-Raphaelite brothers: truth to nature, high seriousness, and poetic spirit." Cook is presented as the heroic explorer, his stern, far-seeing gaze and commanding stance, articulated by the details of his handsome costume and the monumental dimensions of his figure, signify the weight of his impact on Australian history. Towering over Sydney's Hyde Park, this is Woolner's final contribution to this sunny land of promise so cherished in his memory. All society is founded on hero worship. What we worship and who we worship determines who we are. That's why public monuments have always been political. A statue placed in a prominent location isn't just an aesthetic decoration. It is a statement about what a society values and who it values. The left has attacked this statue because they see it as a symbol of colonialism, dispossession, and oppression. But I see it differently. To me, it is a symbol of the Faustian spirit. Oswald Spengler used the word Faustian to describe Western man. He believed that Western civilization possessed an unusually restless, inquisitive, and expansive spirit. Western man wants to climb high, soar upward, and reach ever higher levels of existential intensity. He is drawn towards pure and limitless space. His soul has a tendency towards the infinite, a tendency that is symbolically expressed in his architecture. The spaciousness of Gothic cathedrals and the skyscraper that reaches towards the heavens expresses Faustian man's yearning for limitless space. We can see this same yearning for limitless space in Caspar David Friedrich's painting, Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. The Faustian urge drove the Vikings into the Atlantic and the Black Sea. It drove Columbus to the Americas, and it drove the Portuguese to the East Indies. It drove European mountaineers to scale the highest peaks, and it drove the Americans to the moon. Western personality is overflowing with expansive impulses. These impulses find expression in our art, architecture, and even in our mathematics with the concept of the infinite continuum. When we look at Woolner's monument of Captain Cook, we are confronted with the Faustian spirit of the West. Cook's right arm is stretched out above his head, the palm facing up to the sky. This upward-reaching motion captures Western man's tendency towards the infinite, his desire for pure and limitless space. This desire led Cook to spend years of his life in the limitless space of the Pacific Ocean. It drove him to go further than any man had gone before. He circumnavigated New Zealand and discovered the east coast of Australia and sailed to Antarctica. He did all of this in one of the most treacherous oceans, in a wooden ship that was roughly the size of a tennis court. He was spurred on by the restless pursuit of knowledge and the courage to venture beyond the known. By honouring Cook, we embrace the Faustian spirit of the West, the spirit that drives us to push beyond the known, to challenge the limits of what is possible, and strive towards the infinite. If you would like to learn more about Cook, you can listen to this 2-hour podcast I made on his life for free on Substack. Thanks for listening.